Chapter 5 is not only the attainment in full, but the consequence of Frankenstein's reanimation, not only in theory, but in actuality. Bringing back the monster, which he would never bestow or dub a name to, ruined him, as so many throughout all human history. Reaching the peak of one's mountain granted the opportunity to peer back not only over the trail of one's attainment, but towards the future of what might be ahead from it. From the climax, the incline and decline of what would follow thereafter, and it racked his mind, and by consequence, his body. If not for the ministrations of Clerval, his childhood friend, with his greatest of commitment and demeanor of kinship to him, he may well have perished at the mere recognition of what exactly he had achieved. But thankfully for him, or perhaps not by his own account now, he had survived. Shattered recently perhaps, but pieced back together. And what awaited such a condition but a letter from his cousin and closest a female companion. You just have a shirt and a tinderbox and a ginormous coat cupboard? Alright. Chapter 5 is one of the explicated payoffs of Mary Shelley's primary philosophic thrust, that even should one attain powers beyond that of which man should, his natural rights in science and natural philosophy, that immediately thereafter, even if it should not have wrought any hardship upon the rest of the world yet, the mere act of having done so will bring the destruction of one's confidence in such arts. It will immediately return them, if not to a Luddite, then to one who has finally recognized what their greatest of sacrifices means, at least in this chapter, just for themselves. And yet, even limited as it is, it rips, tears a chunk of the soul out. Back to crawling. You know, not close to the ground is a good place to be when everything's shaking, I find. I've already elaborated on this earlier, but the consequences of accepting this philosophic position of delimitation on moral grounds is the quickest path, if not at its worst, of primitivism to at least a thoroughgoing traditionalism, more than likely in the conservatistic branch. And I don't mean that strictly in the social sense, but primarily in the technologic one. It is, in and of itself, a doctrine of stagnation in the best of cases, and hence, especially from my pro-technologic leanings, as we see that invention is the redeemer of all faults which we have produced for ourselves and nature will produce for us. That not only has such a doctrine failed, but is continually being combated, thankfully, even to the moment. Howdy. What have we here? Another shirt. This guy really likes just having single shirts and ginormous cupboards. Cabinets? Cabinet. There's no cups in that board. Chapter 6 recounts the recovery of Frankenstein and his revulsion for what he has done, for the very arts that enabled him to accommodate what he did. And where did he find that but in the company of his closest of childhood friends, Clerval, the poet, naturalist, not in the scientific sense, and outdoorsman, engaging with the natural glories of our world as they stand unaltered and free from the artifice of the scientist. And to head this reconvalescence, a letter from his dearest love, Elizabeth, to remind him of home away from home, and that before his engagement, in a passion unbridled, that he does have a history, and in that history, family, the closest of filial love, and besides, kithship in Geneva. Anything behind the stairs? Dirt. Oh. Oh, yeah. Right. So that would be why we're hearing little crunching noises. That's his soul shriveling up. That's what we call desiccation of the psyche, my friends. Chapter 6 does make a very good point. It offers the position that indeed the natural is wonderful. Perhaps as wonderful, at least, as the many things that we as human beings might produce. And to that, I agree. But not for the reason that Mary Shelley would seem to propose here. Not in the scientifically delimiting intellectual conservatism that laces the subtext of the plot, but rather for the booming, all-encompassing, unqualified pro-intellectualism that enables us to recognize, metaphysically and ontologically embrace nature, not simply as an appearance, an ineffable vitality that is beyond our grasp, but as one that is systems on systems on systems on systems, millions and millions and millions folded over. Oh, we do have a proper inventory. Better than the hands pounding and the heart shaking, I suppose. We have the luxury to be conscious of in our little blip on that timeline of reality. And that at the very least, because of this fact, that to fully and completely appreciate such a thing, let alone to be a good steward of it, if we wish to maintain that which we were born to protect it from the other systems around our little blue marble, and especially those that are anthropogenic, made by us, those who are actively against such stewardship, then we must not simply experience, perceive, but conceive and understand. Not to the sole purpose of our leverage as benefit, but to protect that which hasn't the luxury of our awareness. I'm gonna go back, because I'm pretty sure we missed a bit of length we could explore. Ah, no, it's just a cave-in and a castle? There's not even anything in the ceiling that indicates it fell! Alright. Well, it is a game circa 2010. We can't be, I suppose, that harsh upon it. Maybe one of these devils of the area properly came about and just decided, enough is enough, we've got to pile up all of these rocks. Disaster strikes again, not by the circumstances of life's natural course, as Victor Frankenstein himself has trodden upon, but instead by the direct consequences of his own monstrosity. He receives a letter from his dearest father, which explains that his youngest brother is dead, and not just dead, murdered. And that murder, he knows, is by the consequence of his own creation. Poor William, who was young, in the bloom of life, has been taken from him, choked by the neck. At least this has something besides just a single shirt in it. I'll accept that. In place of the monster Frankenstein knows to be the true culprit, which he witnesses on his way to his hometown of Geneva, while on the outskirts, in the midst of a storm, in the deep, inaccessible valleys of his mountainous home, Justine Moritz, a servant brought up true and pure, with even investment from the family into her education, who bestowed the most thorough of love upon them, is taken instead as the accused. For within her clothes they found a picture which was in a locket given to little William of Madame Frankenstein, the deceased mother of the family. Something that all besides Victor himself would perceive as the most damning bit of evidence as to her being the killer. After the reprieve of nature and friendship that Victor himself found in Clairvaux and Ingolstadt, his return home shows him that down the mountain path, from the apex he had achieved, now those consequences are just beginning to be paid in full.
Redeem us both, Daniel. Descend into the darkness where Alexander waits and murder him. Your former self, Daniel.
Note to self, enjoy the dark descent and kill the fuck out of that guy. Okay, well, I guess that's as good a reason as any, eh? Symbolism being here that his accomplishments in science have not only haunted him, crippled his soul, but now have snatched the life of his youngest brother, the potential of youth drawn to an end undue. The opportunity of so many shall be sacrificed on the altar of progress, and yet the fault in such a substrate of position is that in order to have even attained such delights as could be lost in the first place, there was not sacrifice laid on the altar of progress, as no such exists, but rather the labors of men and women who fought to provide for humanity. As the chemist Mr. Waldman himself says in the earlier chapters, that the genius of men ever turns to the advantage of humanity, not in isolation as we see here, but instead upon its exposure to the light of the intellect of the common, that what holds the tension of unrefined, rude, and destructive discovery is the recognition and structure provided by all men who have the bother, care, will, and capacity to understand. And by this tension we attain a balance that earns the title of being called progress.
Heavy stone suddenly dropped, sealing me inside. I was trapped.
A whole line dedicated to I was trapped. Oh. Ah, yes. I do recall one of the big things of the whole game is that it's a fully 3D physics-rendered experience. I believe I recall that even being on the Steam page. Alongside those like Half-Life 2, this was quite revolutionary at the time. Most 3D games being limited to only just the predefined physics of the thing. I am swiftly running out of oil. No. Stay open. I would have loved it if it just slammed back down again. Like, no, I don't think so. To make comment on the structure of the thing, thus far I have been pretty pleased. All of the controls have felt very smooth. Although the controls and the environments themselves are very rudimentary, it's all been quite well at building a strong atmosphere and maintaining aesthetic cohesion. Even without the inclusion of some 1800s literature, as I was just reading in Frankenstein, this is positively invoking all of the features of antiquity that I would expect. Obviously, drastically more lavish than might have been properly afforded, in fact, but nonetheless austerely antiquarian, capacious, and with an air of militant nobility, heavily suffused with the incense-like spice of genuine terror around the corner. We really never just consider hopping out of the window to get out of here, huh? Oh, one that's not voice acted for a change. Okay. That is a good gameplay feature. If you're trying to convey your story predominantly through bound materials, lost information, things that are left behind, like text logs, audio logs, things of the sort, having them in some way being marked as a piece of the story's progress will demarcate what you necessarily need and what's merely icing on the cake. Proper progress versus a nice little bit of lore. Lessons learned. You know what? I can see your point. Is it undone? I love a perfectly equivocal name. It leaves so much to the imagination, especially when you've got the right couching, as we've got here, the perfect substrate to suggest something of grave significance and yet leave it ambiguous enough for the player to fill in the blanks. Oh, they finally modeled the ceiling having damage. Congratulations, we've moved up in things. Albeit with a bit of a leak issue. Hang on, let me see if I'm a vampire. Ah! Nope, sanity's still dropping. Man, what a shame. Could have had a real coming to Dracula moment. Just fed the idea that the Baron is in fact the one and the same who came from the West over 300 years ago, lived through the time of occupation, and joined the coveted Order of the Black Eagle along with the great leaders of his country. This is something you see often going overlooked, that titles, whether they be of antiquity as we see here, or something a little bit more contemporary, modernistic, they all imply certain features and characteristics by virtue of their history, that there is a causal chain connecting every individual, whether they are the originators of such ascriptions and annotations to their personhood or not, will come with direct implications. And while we think of these very often in strictly concrete material terms today, you need look no further than titles such as Imperator, Justicar, Judge, Honor, Noble, and so on, to see that there is implication built directly into the explicit utterances, articulations of social position, not just in hierarchy, but in the mythos too, the narrative that enshrouds such. I hope using up all of more cave-ins. I guess that would be the reality. Well, ain't no going back that way. All right. Was that for real? There's just enough movement in every environment to suppose that there might be something there. That takes quite a concerted balance to be stricken, especially if the foundational premise of your gameplay mechanics is that of tension.
I built That's when I saw a faint blue shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light.
Oh, I have agency again. The flies being there does grant some explanation for all of the spider's webs spread all over the area, which directly correspond to all the piles of viscera and these crawling isopods. Whoever was directing the level design clearly had some creative vision in mind.
I reached out, closing it in my hands.
Pick up the orb, put it in your mind. This feeling of missing something, which I do admire, does not quite leave one in want, per se, but it does absolutely leave one with a sense of wonder at the circumstance. Reflecting on it, I do think that that might be one of the reasons I tend to favor older games, not sufficiently old as to be completely abstruse, and more experimental than given any kind of practical play. The sense of that which compels, because it is not giving you the fullest story to the face. There is genuine mystique about such a thing, and we can see this in BioShock, Hitman Contracts, even Dead Space, where these elect not quite to hold one's hand, in juxtaposition against games like Doom, to a greater extent Baldur's Gate 3, and even certain more friendly games of the past like Pac-Man, as we played as our first game. Those offer fair guidance the whole way through, not as a bid per se for accessibility. This game, along with the others I've mentioned, are very accessible by their very nature. These bother to venture forth with a character of their own, rather than providing familiarity. I should have done that earlier. I'm going to think about how I missed that throughout the entire game now. Given the frequency of traversing through various areas, and that each has set pieces that they rely upon to convey all of the information, having scraps of lore drop in the interstices whenever you're moving from room to room through doors does well to maintain pacing, whereas so many horror games especially end up being a slog by virtue of the fact that they don't have enough content besides ambling through more or less dimly lit spaces. That, like proper timber, keeps things at an even lighting. Hello? Sounds like Chewbacca. That's something that I should have taken note of before. The candles themselves are acting as something of a marker for where we've been, an indicator as to whether the places we've traversed have been cleared or not. Literal brain rot. The game knew what was up. What up? Splish splash, I was standing over a bath. One day I'll return. If it wasn't for the thought of you, my love, I wouldn't be able to go on. When I find myself doing terrible things, I take comfort in you. As long as I am able to think of you and long for a life together, I know I'm better than the others. I weep for them. They lust for power without restraint, where I only crave fair judgment and a safe return. What is that? Oh, I guess we can go back to the spirit realm. Alright. Ah, I see a mind flayer cylinder. Well, that is certainly enough wine for a lifetime. My agency, it's returned to me. I'm sorry, is there something in the gore pile that I'm to do? I'm glad there's a squish gore button. That's certainly what we needed. And around we go. Chemistry, chemistry, chemistry. Alright, let's drink the glowing green Mountain Dew. Go, 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 go. Ah, yes. Nothing quite like it. We have come here to do the doom. It just so happens that this is on Mount Doom. I can make that, I guarantee it. Yep. Alright, never mind. Yep. Nope. No, okay. Well, I guess that's my hopes dashed. Man, that's a rash you should really get checked out. I'm telling you. That is straight up lethal. We have just enjoyed our first peek into Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and my goodness. Following up Dead Space, this does not disappoint by any means, even the fact given that it is from 2010. One of the OGs, at least as far as I ever known, of the horror first-person genre. It has maintained phenomenal sound layering, motion layering in the background, which is something that could have been worked on with Dead Space, although it did put more pronouncement upon the audio, has maintained an authentic feeling, antiquity aesthetic, and is weaving a very intriguing story about not just the morality of digging around in African dunes, but also the cost of life being used as a means to an end, rather than an end upon itself. I look forward to the next. I thank you all for enjoying here today. If you liked the video, please feel free to check out the rest of my channel. Like, subscribe, do all the things of that nature, share it around. If you want to see more of it, you can always check us out on X, Instagram, BitChute, or TikTok. We have finally got all those updated and caught up to the present release schedule. And if you think it might be worth a little bit of your hard-earned coin, then feel free to visit the links below to Stream Elements or Patreon. If you visit our Patreon, you can join us for the merest cost at proponent tier of $5 per month. With that, you'll get your name put on the end of every long-form piece of content, like this stream here, be able to participate in polls for the channel to see which direction we might go into. You'll have access to a members-only area in our Discord server, the Threefold Edifactory, and of course you get all of our content in one neat, tidy area, along with perhaps a few extra goodies. And beyond all of that, I hope that you never miss your opportunities.